Good morning. In April, Red Star member and DSA co-chair Megan Romer went to the Party of the European Left conference in Brussels. At this conference, she delivered some remarks on the issues of militarism and austerity and participated in discussions with other left parties on important political issues facing our movement around the world. Megan's remarks were published in DSA's publication, Democratic Left. She also spent some time with the Workers Party of Belgium, PTB, and had an opportunity to learn the ins and outs of life in the PTB and see their political strategy in action. PTB and DSA were the subjects of a detailed comparison study organized by the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung. I'm sitting down with Megan to debrief her experience in Belgium, what she learned from spending time with PTB, and what our similarities and differences can tell us about building a militant revolutionary party. Megan, thanks for joining us. Let's set the stage a little bit. What was the Party of the European Left Conference, and what was your role as a guest on behalf of DSA?
Yeah, so it took me a while to figure out how the European left even works, right? So the EU exists, and so these European left kind of umbrella parties exist mostly for European left parties within the EU, but not entirely. So there are three that you need to know. So there's the PEL, the Party of the European Left, which is a bunch of parties from a bunch of different countries. Also some independent socialist organizations. There's like Socialists for Free Scotland or something like that. Like a handful that aren't really parties. They're more like what we would call a NGO or a nonprofit. Then there's ELA, which is the European Left Alliance, and I think it's European Left Alliance for People in the Planet or something, a longer name. That's a different coalition of left parties. And then there's the European Left in Parliament, which is the parliamentary bloc, everybody who's in a left party or on the left. There's some independents in there. So PEL encompasses both ELA parties and no, I'm sorry, I just messed it up again. European Left in Parliament encompasses both ELA parties and PEL parties. So I was able to actually I did a PEL's conference, which is all the parties that are members of the Party of the European Left. They send delegates. There's some independent people, I think, there too. And they have, a conference. They vote on their program for the next few years. They vote on their leadership for the next few years. And just, panel discussions, kind of typical left conference, right? Lots of people, talking heads on stage discussing things. And also lots of like good hobnobbing. And I also was able to have lunch with the leaders of the European Left Alliance, which is the other European Left Party. And then I was able to do an event at the European Left in Parliament, which included both. So it's like a Venn diagram with a big circle around it, and then also some like little circles that it's kind of complicated.
Kind of a Holy Trinity situation.
It is, yeah. So it's very quickly I've sort of been at this for a while, but you have to kind of do real diplomacy, right? Like you can't shit talk the other left formations while you're right. It's important to not shit talk, but also not to overly praise, right? Like, oh, you're from this country, what do you think about, because sometimes you might have accidentally just walked into a beef. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to walk into beeves. So the Party of the European Left Conference, long story short, was just this great little conference in Brussels. I think there were 30 or 40 parties represented. I got to meet zillions of people, have lots of several actual bilaterals, like formal bilaterals, me speaking on behalf of DSA. And I do want to make it clear, I was there on behalf of DSA. Like what we're doing here is a Red Star project, and I have my own analysis of stuff I learned there, but I'm, everybody's co-chair, and I was happy to represent DSA and very proud to represent DSA. The Europeans are very excited and motivated to see what we've been able to accomplish. So yeah, formal bilaterals, ripping cigs outside with the Greek delegation, and everything in between.
Awesome. The theme of the convening was against austerity and militarism, and I see that today actually the PTB is doing a nationwide mobilization for welfare, not warfare. So there's definitely a kind of theme to the political issues and the approach that these organizations are taking to the problems that are facing the world.
Yeah,
Can you say a little bit more about the kind of political issues that were talked about and kind of how the parties are approaching a lot of the political problems in this conjuncture?
sure. So I think there's some subtext that I kind of picked up on, but it wasn't immediately apparent. The Party of the European Left, part of the reason that the European Left Alliance split from the Party of the European Left, at least ostensibly on paper and overtly, was because of objection to some of the policies. Syriza from Greece is a member of the Party of the European Left. They had the presidency of Greece during that sort of austerity era. And so there's like longer going beef about whether or not that was the right and whether or not the party had any control of that and what actually happened. So I think some of that was the Party of the European Left being like, no, 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 we're anti-austerity. Like we are us right here. So it was a little bit of that, which I don't really think there was ever a question that any party was like anti-austerity is just politics are weird, right? And the way we interpret them by reading the newspaper outside of it is weird. And but yeah, also with the wars ramping up, Iran, we're in, God, what is it, year 3, 4 of the crisis in Gaza, also year 76 or whatever of the crisis in Gaza. And Trump kidnapping presidents of other countries with nobody doing anything about it. Definitely saber rattling toward Cuba, saber rattling toward China. So there's that like very obvious connect, right? Like austerity is connected to international politics. Like this to anyone with a socialist analysis, like yeah, of course, those are the same. We're spending money on this, so we can't spend money on this. They come right out and say it,
Hmm.
as long as you're listening. And that was the theme. And they go into other things too. There was a feminist mini conference talking about those, but it all kind of comes back to austerity and militarism. Like it's a solid theme because yeah, that's the world we live in. That's the primary contradiction. So yeah.
Yeah, and was there any I guess you would say like I don't know, special emphasis or special considerations on you representing the DSA and the United States as I think in a lot of ways like the nerve center of this militarism push, the nexus of a lot of this um, rearmament talk, both technologically and financially, and certainly a nation that is part of the global far right alliance that is kind of reshaping the world right now, from our military firms as well as just our general like ruling class structure as being this defining force in the world right now.
Yeah, there was actually a funny moment. So I spoke on a panel with Peter Mertens from the PTB, Jeremy Corbyn, obviously, and also the woman who is the I think she's the ambassador to the I think she's the ambassador to all the Low Countries, so Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, from Palestine. And also like I'm not totally clear that the EU has an ambassador, but she's that, right? She's in Brussels to be the ambassador for Palestine in the region, for whatever uh, bodies exist. So that was I extremely honored to be on that panel. But it was very funny that the guy who introduced me was a member of the Party of the European Left's youth movement. They were the hosts, and when he introduced me, he was like, just like America is, the bane of humanity's existence. Anyway, here's an American, and he kind of realized he was doing it as he was. It was very funny.
Mhm.
And so it was like, here you go. I was like, thanks. But it turns out my speech was basically the
Yeah.
same. Um, yeah, I mean, I do think sometimes the analysis overemphasizes Trump. Um, and that is true here. It is true there. It's he's the he's the tip of the spear, but he's just the tip of the spear. There's a whole ass spear, right? Trump can die tomorrow, and there's still the spear.
Sure. No,
It's
no comment on that particular sentiment, but yes.
yeah, yeah. No, he's an old man. It
Yeah.
could happen, right?
Yeah.
It's a thing that
Right. But
happens,
yeah, I think we all have a sense that Trump is a symptom of a rotten system.
right?
And it's important to, you know, share that analysis and make sure that we're operating in concordance with it. What were
Yeah.
some of your big takeaways from the conference? Any highlight experiences that were clarifying, anything inspiring or otherwise remarkable that happened while you were there?
Yeah, so a few funny things. So the kind of split between Party of the European Left and the European Left Alliance, they'll both tell you sort of different things about why the split happened and what preceded the split and what um keeps them apart. But I think the kind of elephant in the room is NATO. And so hearing people, the Party of the European Left is very much anti-NATO. And hearing their analysis, like, okay, what do we do about it? It's it's not totally dissimilar from doing anything sort of abolitionisty in the US, where um it's like the correct analysis, but people are kind of afraid of it. So even people who are like, yeah, it's bad, but if we just get rid of it, then what happens? So there's this uh and the kind of social democrats have just kind of leaned into being like, well, we can't get rid of NATO. It's here already, and we're all going to die if we get rid of it. And figuring out how to orient to that is causing, I think, a bit of a split. Um, there's also this thing of like NATO's bad, but the Ukraine, like we have to protect Ukraine with all our strength and all our money and all our everything because NATO's good in that case or something. Like it's sort of a weird yeah, I'm not exactly sure what I'm trying to say. So selling it to the public is difficult because people have this kind of yeah, but
Hmm.
response to it. So the Party of the European Left crew is more just directly anti-NATO. It is notable that the European Left Alliance, the Nordic parties are mostly in that one, and the Nordics are closer to Russia, so they have a slightly more, well, NATO's bad, but we need somebody to protect us kind of um, attitude.
Hmm.
It's not it's not always said, and a lot of it's kind of trying to read the writing on the wall, but yeah, one thing I was actually warned in advance, like don't talk about Ukraine, and of course I'm slightly contrarian, so
Hmm.
I did in casual settings in particular, as like where's your party stand on Ukraine? And for the most part, the analysis I got was similar to our analysis, that it's awful, it's devastating, people are dying at incredible rates still. Um and also it's a proxy war for NATO that the US caused by doing proxy NATO shit, right? So
Yeah.
it's um so this idea that like, well, the US has to send a zillion cajillion dollars worth of weapons, like when has that ever turned out well for anyone? Every time we
Yeah.
send a zillion cajillion dollars worth of weapons, what happens 10 years later? Like every season of blowback is about that.
Right. Right. Um, I think it's definitely a real conundrum, and I think a problem that a lot of the Western left is facing right now. That like this is, you know, we can understand the dimensions of this problem, but we're really ill-equipped to act or to um, really challenge our ruling classes in their commitment to kind of this, you know, you know, network of proxy wars for global hegemony. Peter Merton's actually, I think his most recent book that came out a year or two ago was kind of about this shift in the world order where a lot of the countries in the periphery, the global south, the exploited nations, however you want to frame it, like they are, from in their both working classes and their ruling classes looking for a different alignment. And I think that that is uh, a world historical shift that we are just beginning to reckon with here. But it's definitely interesting to kind of have that as a background issue, and a problem that we are kind of really struggling to confront.
Yeah.
Um,
There were some things that surprised me. I thought that Palestine was a little more complicated over there. My understanding was, and I think probably in some external party stuff, that some of the parties waffle a little bit, and ultimately two-staters or whatever. That is not the sentiment I got in the room. In
mhm,
the room, it was free Palestine all day.
mhm,
Um, so that was good to see. I'm curious. I think they struggle to thread that needle in Europe just like we do here. That um the you know the Holocaust happened in their backyards and
mhm,
perpetrated by many of their grandparents. Um, we also have a Holocaust perpetrated by many of our grandparents
mhm.
in the U.S. So, sort of figuring out how to reconcile that, but they struggle a little bit. I think maybe more, especially in Germany, but maybe more than we do with oh, you're for free Palestine, then you must be anti-Semitic, right? And that sort of unnuanced. There are only two things, which is free Palestine and safety for Jewish people, and you have to pick one.
Right.
And which I think most of us think is a absolutely ridiculous analysis.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but it's one that sells easy in the
Mhm.
media, right? And it sells it tugs on your heartstrings, and it's those
Yeah.
overly simplified analyses do well. I mean, just like every other piece of this thing that we're saying, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh well, oh, you want to get rid of police? Okay, well, what about when somebody breaks into your house and kills you? Um,
Mhm.
just like, okay, that's not okay.
Right. Yeah. So some very deep political challenges that I think our movement is currently struggling to overcome. Certainly in the context of a ascendant neoliberal neo-fascist right that is cleaning our clocks on the daily, basically. So a tough situation. But I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about what um, PTB's role as the hosts were, kind of as kind of the country host, not necessarily the organizational sponsors.
Yeah, so they're a member obviously of the Party of the European Left, though they were not actually a member, as I understand it, until the European Left Alliance broke off. They decided that with the split, they wanted to join one of the parties. And so that was interesting. I didn't realize that. I thought they were like a long time member, but apparently not. But yeah, so it was on their turf. So of course there were lots of folks around. They probably had a bigger presence, I think, than anybody else. But this was not a huge conference. It was a couple hundred people, a few hundred people. Not It was not thousands.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so Peter Martins was there. He's extremely charismatic. He's like about the most charismatic guy you've ever met, but also extremely brilliant. So
Hmm.
he's sort of a just very present in a room. But also like lots of their militants and folks who do their international coordination and things like that. And as much as Peter Martins is sort of a has a little star power, um they're very much a party, and it's interesting to see them not, they're like, yeah, no, that guy's great in front of people, but he's one of us.
Hmm. Yeah, PTB came to DSA's national convention last year and was part of our intra-left kind of discussion event, which I thought was really interesting. They were paired up with us in that report that the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung put together, kind of comparing the very divergent party structures and party histories between the two of us. And I remember from that discussion hearing about their kind of three-tiered structure, their cell formations, and like their general ideological outlook on party building to be really interesting. Did you get to spend some time with them? Who did you spend time with? Like, how was that for you?
Yeah, so I am completely fat. I'm like ready to move to some little town in Brussels and start my 12-person cell and leave all this nonsense behind. No, I love this nonsense. But it is very appealing because I really love the way they're structured. I love the way they think about each other and about the party. And so I was able to spend a day in Antwerp, which is I don't know, like 40 minutes by train north of Brussels, the day after the conference. So, and it was really great because I got to spend a day with like some just kind of like local party militants, like folks who just are on the ground doing the thing. And I got to do a bunch of stuff. So the day started with a workers tour of the Antwerp train station, which was really fun. So the tour guide, they have a party militant who is a tour guide for a living. That's his gig. And when you go to Europe, you like there are all these like incredible, extraordinary buildings, and in Belgium in particular, right? Because we all like know the history of the Congo and such. You can really see the like this is built on the backs of the global south in a very present way. um I mean, like it's very present in the sense that it's like literally like the king's faces on stuff, King Leopold II's faces on stuff, and it's like what that guy did, and it's like um and they're not shy about it. Like there is some reckoning with how bad it was, but also so it was really fun. So the Antwerp train station is just this extremely gorgeous, like really, really like gilded, beautiful marble, blah, blah, blah. Um, so to be able to take a tour with somebody who's like a militant leftist, to be like, okay, so this is where the worker died and they didn't put up a plaque. And this is where, this is who was exploited to dig up this marble. It's still very beautiful, but it gives that context of what it means to exploit. And yeah, no, really fascinating. I want there to be there are like lefty tours in most big cities. There's like, and then there's like a Marx in Brussels tour because that's where he wrote the Communist Manifesto, and you can like walk around like there's his house, there's the restaurant where he wrote the manifesto, whatever. But actually, I'm like, we need like a thing where you just actually talk about the famous thing and like who are the workers? Like somebody do the Brooklyn Bridge. Like there's some fascinating stuff with it. Anyway, so we did that, but it was like a dozen local militants, most of whom were like middle-aged women. I was like, hello, friends, associates, people of my ilk. We were like talking about our teenagers. It was really fun. Also happened to have a former congressman and a press secretary from the Japanese Communist Party. I got to ride up on the train with them, so that was a fun little trio of visitors. But yeah, so we did the train station tour, then we went to lunch, then we went to the PTB. I think they call it the house. It's a 4-story city block kind of place. There's a meeting room in the downstairs, a bunch of offices. Peter Merton's office where he records his podcast is there. I recorded a podcast episode with him, which you can watch on YouTube. And then some of the militants took me we went to dinner. They're very good about like making sure there's time to sit down and eat a meal in Europe in a way that in the US we're like, let's just grab a gas station sushi. we'll run. They're like, no, we're gonna sit down for an hour. Even the leftists, right? Even the radicals are like, no, we're civilized here. We sit down for a meal. And then we went to a cross-organizational demonstration for Palestine, which is a demonstration they've been doing every week for like a year and a half. And it took over from another, like they just kind of keep doing it. It was in front of the Opera House, another one of those like moments where you're like, yeah, so the the exploitation of the third world, it creates really beautiful things and also extreme misery. I wonder if there's a way we could not have it be that unbalanced. And the demonstration was really fun. Talking to the PTB folks about how they do these cross-organizational things was really interesting. They have some of the same struggles with coalition work that we do, and some of the same opportunities and joy in coalitional work. One thing that happened during that is a man walked over to me and handed me a bag of chocolates, and they were like Easter egg shaped chocolates. And I was like, thank you. From one of their coalition orgs. So apparently they sell these chocolates and it raises money for Cuba. And that's like here we have like our kids selling chocolate to raise money so they can have arts programs in school. There, they actually have the arts programs in school, so they sell chocolates, but they did just give me one.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my Cuba fundraiser chocolate, and it's the same sort of stuff we fundraise for. It's sending medical supplies mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so just lots of little things. But the fun thing about sitting down for a meal is you can sit there and just ask a zillion questions in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they also have questions, and I'm like, oh, who cares about Trump? Let's talk about your thing.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I'm of course very happy, and it's really an honor to be able to brag about DSA
Mm-hmm.
in those settings, and everyone's very impressed and shocked that there was a left movement this big in the US. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
can't really be overstated how much the rest of the world sees us as the great Satan.
Well, it just means that it's so important for us to keep doing the work that we do,
Mm-hmm.
and keep trying to, I don't know, carve out a place for politics of dignity and survival, and um, you know, global justice and socialism, and
Yeah.
here where we are. What sort of things were you able to ask about? What were some of the questions that you had, and what did you learn?
Yeah, so my most of my understanding of the PTB had come from that report. From like that was most of what I do. Like I read a couple articles here and there in Jacobin and in other places, but that was like my understanding of their structure. So the first thing I did was like everybody read that article, right? Everybody read the report, right? And some of them had, some hadn't. Um, it's very funny because when I read the report, I was like, damn, that other party we're getting compared to sounds cool. And they kind of felt the same, but in reverse, which is really funny. Um, but yeah, so I had lots of questions. One of the questions I had was about structure. So I was really curious about how this works with the cells. Basically, they have it like maxes out at 10. Like that's your base group, is what it's called.
Hmm.
Um, you and your base group are a family. You meet very regularly for a long time. You talk about stuff. And then the base group leads, I think they're called coaches. The coaches report upward. The sort of central committee is in extremely close contact with the coaches. So when something happens, whatever it is, they very quickly try to get their base groups to discuss it and then try to synthesize an analysis of how folks are feeling
Hmm.
on the ground. I was like, that sounds so hard, because one of the things we struggle with so much in DSA is communication up and down, and even and side to side too. How are we getting information from one place to the next? And they, I think, because they prioritize it, right? It's like it's getting information from each other to each other is the core of what they're doing.
Hmm.
I was curious about, so they have a much tighter political line. Obviously, they are openly, I believe they refer to themselves as Marxist Leninists. Um, Openly have, they're communist. You have to be a communist to be a member. You have to, like, when you're joining, you say I am these things and I believe these things. So as is the case with many communist parties, you're not allowed to have factions. And so I actually asked at dinner. So like obviously factions sort of organically form, right? Like people kind of form friend groups or whatever. And they were like, no, absolutely not.
Hmm.
You do not. And I was like, nobody like calls each other and they're like, what is this? What's going on? How are we gonna organize it? They're like, no. if you have a problem with something that's going on, you come to a meeting and you debate it politically. And that's how it works. And like, there's no, and I was like, how do you push back if you don't like something at the party? And they're like, you go to a meeting and you debate it and you discuss it with your comrades as comrades. It's not, and they're like, yeah, I mean, of course you have like friends, but we're not here to be friends. We're here to be comrades. We're in the struggle together.
Hmm.
And that sounds that sounds like a very far distant future.
Hmm.
Something that we even see, even pulling it back to like a micro level, we yeah, it just it feels very different and very distant.
Hmm.
The idea of just like, oh, you actually just make it politics and you bring it back and you don't turn it into proxy battles and you don't turn it into, wow,
Hmm.
cool. um, so that was really interesting. I was curious about the size of the base groups. I of course I've been like a crank about this for a while. Like I don't think you can actually organize with more than like 100 people successfully. You
Hmm.
just can't. Um, and they are very big on and so I think sometimes like we have these like really big chapters and it's like how are you successfully organizing with all these people if you're not in some sort of micro unit.
Right.
um they totally believe that and much more strictly than I do. Like mine's like 100, maybe 200. They're like 10.
Right.
Um, and they are, they, so I was like, okay, so like when it gets to 10 or 12 and they're like, oh, it's much better to have two groups of six than one group of 12. And I'm
Hmm.
like, huh, okay, interesting. Because you need a lot of time to discuss. And yeah, I I'm like, huh, like, do you get enough diversity of opinion? Do you get enough diversity of experience? Do you get enough in a group? But yeah, I'm like I said, I want to move to Belgium and try it. I just
Hmm.
some small town. I'll be a flower seller or something with a little
Hmm.
bike, with my flowers in it, and I will become because I need to know. Yeah, no,
Sounds.
it's just such a different way of constructing it. And I don't know if having a tighter political line. I mean, I'm sure having a tighter political line makes that much easier, right? If
Mhm.
you're really doing a kind of big tent mass party, you do want to incorporate. If you're trying to make it work between all these different tendencies, you need to be incorporating a pretty broad range of tendencies, and
Yeah.
six might not do that. Um,
Yeah,
but maybe it will. I don't
was
know.
looking through the report, and I think it's just a very different structure because those are your militants, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
groups of 6 to 12 are your your you're totally bought in cadre, but they also have a broader supporter group, and they have allied organizations. So there are lots of ways for people to support the party, even if they are not necessarily, part of that upper layer. And I remember reading in one of the Jackman articles about the party that they went from 800 hyper militants in 2008 or so to 24,000, supporters. So that's like a very huge transformation of their organization. And I think, yeah, the degree of getting people bought in to the line through these discussions, kind of doing democratic centralism through convincing and not necessarily just doing commandism through the central committee. These are things that help give the line life in a way that I think is important for us to consider. Um, One thing that really stood out to me, and again in the report, is that there's a very rigorous vetting and recruiting process for party militants in PTB, versus what is described in DSA as a voluntocracy. And I think that that's a um, huge distinction for us to kind of pour over, when we're thinking about how do we um, turn DSA into a organization that's capable of, you know, generating a movement of millions of people. You know, is it through kind of pulling a million people in and expecting them to learn how to lead together, or is it through developing a leadership layer that can kind of understand the situation and kind of grow its understanding outward through action? So these are, I think, really deep distinctions that are interesting for us to pore over and think about how we can, um, learn and adapt.
Mhm.
Um, what else did you learn about the PTB, their goals, their theory of change, and any obstacles that they've kind of come across in their recent, I would think 10 to 15 year turn?
Yeah, I mean they again, some of the similar struggles that we have, their membership, they're open about, it's like we have the problem, it's sort of downwardly mobile, disproportionately educated compared to the general population, disproportionately white, disproportionate, so similar. They do skew a lot older. That is the DSA is the only org or the only party like org where we're like, damn, everybody's so young. Like that is not the case anywhere else. And I mean, I don't know. There are lots of things we could attribute it to. I think one is that they actually have childcare in European countries. Um, like you actually have it. So like people my age, right? I'm in my 40s. I was relatively young when I had my kid, but it's not like uncommon for somebody in their early 40s to have elementary school children. How do you do anything when you have elementary school children? Like literally, how do you do anything? But they have childcare in their countries,
Mhm.
which actually makes a big difference. Um, not everywhere, right? Different countries have different levels of um coverage and such, but
Social support, welfare,
yeah,
etc.
yeah. So, but we have none. None. We have no social support, right? None whatsoever. And also, in your global South left parties, they have cultural care for children in a way that we don't, right? It's like you just bring your kids, and yeah, like sometimes they make a noise. Who cares? Um, we're like, no, children must be separated from the group, but also we do not provide you any support for that. And I don't think that's the attitude in DSA, but it is something that sort of is built into our culture. Like
Right.
struggle to hear the noise of children in a group setting,
Hmm.
and continue to function. Speaking of which, my child is making noise in the kitchen right now. Malcolm,
Mhm.
quiet. um, but yeah, so they had expressed that some of the struggle with the younger people, they have a hard time getting them through the full kind of codrification training process. Like
Hmm.
it's a lot of hours of reading, it's a lot of hours of study, it's a lot of discussion. You have to come out to things, you have to like be reliable and
Hmm.
show up to things. So yeah, that is a shared struggle. They have been seeing more success with a parliamentary political program. For a long time, I think PTB did not do elections. They were um, working. I mean, in that but back when they were still small, they were working to mostly embed themselves in the labor movement. Some of the older militants in the party were like, "Yeah, I worked in a factory because that was what I was told to do." I think a lot of that industrialization is just more difficult. Industrialization as a labor program is more difficult as we deindustrialize the country in general.
Hmm.
It's the reason you have to be a teacher or a nurse anymore is because there is no factory. Like, yeah, it's a strategic industry, but also like what factory are you gonna work in? Um, so I'm being hovered over now by the child.
Hmm.
He's hovering.
Hmm.
Okay.
Malcolm is standing guard against revisionism as we talk about European parliamentary parties. So,
Exactly.
appreciate
No one
appreciate
has
the
more
vigilance.
opinions on the European left than my 16-year
Okay.
old somehow. Um,
But yeah, speaking of this parliamentary turn, I think in the Jacobin interview with Raul Hedibo, He talks about like being in parliament but not finding any power there, right? And I think
Mhm.
that's a issue that we are struggling to confront, I think, in DSA as we, gain these electoral successes. We put people in city councils and state legislatures and Congress, and executive offices, that the office alone is not a sufficient engine of class power to drive the social transformations that we're hoping for. And I think I'm curious if you talked about that at all, if you talked about their parliamentary strategy, how they uh, think about the work of governing, particularly when, they're a small party with a that's always going to be a minority faction in, um, the parliament.
Yeah, not always.
Okay,
Eventually
fair
we win,
enough, fair
right?
enough.
um so a little bit, not as much as I would have liked to at some point. Even sitting down for meals, you run out of hours in the it was really just like a single day that I had to spend on my PTB intensive. But
Sure.
I do get to go back. I'm going for their big festival, which they do this like music and politics festival, music, arts, politics, books, called Manifiesta. So I'm going there in September, and I look forward to asking a zillion more questions. Um, so one thing is they are very agitational toward pretty much everybody,
Mhm.
including the social democrats. You see a mix of this in Europe on the left a bit, how agitational they are against the social democrats. The reality is, it's important to note that like the social democrats are like barely social democrats anymore. Like they're significantly to the right of what a social democrat would have been in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Um, but they do have, it's an interesting thing because so the US is so privatized that our politicians don't have the same amount of power because the market has so much of the power. They're a little less privatized. It depends on the country. Sweden, interestingly, is the most privatized of the European countries. People like somehow in the US we have like Sweden as this um in the popular liberal imagination, Sweden is utopic, and this beautiful, perfect place. It's heavily privatized and getting worse, including things like the train system. They're privatizing the trains, which is crazy. So I'm like, don't do it. Um, but when you privatize something, you lose control. It becomes the markets. It's not the elected bodies to control anymore. And in the U.S., we've privatized everything. So including things like we're watching the education system get privatized. The public health system barely exists. It's privatized out to
I mean,
hospitals.
we just watched
Um,
our, aerospace industry get,
yeah,
privatized to the tune of trillions of dollars, right? This is
crazy.
it's crazy. It's crazy, but it
It's
is like
crazy.
it's crazy that even though it's so thorough that there are like so many more layers of financialization and speculation to kind of keep throwing on top of this totally unstable house of cards. But that's, beside the point.
Yeah.
Back to the question of governing and
Yeah,
the
yeah. So they
austerity
do
and
have,
privatization.
when you are an elected official, you probably have a little more power in a country that's less privatized, in a country that's somewhere in the realm of being closer to a social democracy um than our full-on corporatocracy, where you know people will call us like, they'll call you and me anti-electoral. We're certainly not. It's just the question of this idea that the only way to win power is through the elections. It's like you can elect every single electable office in the US with a socialist, and you still don't have socialism because it's so heavily private. You're not even close to, I mean, maybe you'd be closer, I don't know, but um there's no socialism button, there's no socialism bill. But they're a little closer in Europe, but they still, my understanding is that the PTB is uses political office to be quite agitational. Their purpose of winning an office is not necessarily to win reforms, with the goal, there's sort of that separate, like, what is the point of reforms? Is the point of reforms to be agitational? Is it to like show people like, hey, this is the sort of thing you can get if you elect more people to office? Or is it to like make people's lives a little better so they have a little more time to organize? Or is it there are a bunch of different questions about it. they seem less committed to just passing a bunch of stuff and more committed to using the bully pulpit, which is not to say they. My understanding is not that they make a point of kind of doing a bad job, right? Like they still attempt to be functional, good legislators, but uh, it's definitely the point does not seem to be we will legislate our way to socialism by
Hmm.
any stretch. And I think you definitely see. I mean, our electeds do this too. You see a lot of their electeds getting arrested for stuff. They are openly agitational in the House, but also out at street protests and stuff, taking arrests and using that as an agitational opportunity. But yeah, the point is agitation, not
Hmm.
legislation, I think, is my understanding of it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Thinking a little bit more in this kind of comparison mode, thinking about the problems that we've, had in DSA, our organizing challenges versus the challenges of this, tight, you know, ML DemCent formation. Like, what are you've done a lot of interfacing with DSA chapter leaders. You've, visited lots of people, met with lots of our comrades, problem solved on a lot of problems. And really tried to help chapters of DSA become, these engines of political activity and resistance. What are some of the challenges that you've seen in DSA chapters that are, similar or different from the ones that you saw with the PTB?
Yeah. Ultimately, one of our biggest challenges is just convincing people that this is where they should spend their time. Um, it's hard. It's hard to. I think sometimes when we frame it out and when we think about it, we find ourselves like, okay, here's why you should be in DSA and not some other organizing. And it's like, we're not competing with any other organizations. We're competing with Netflix. And rightfully so. Modern life is hard and sucks. And like having a little escape at the end of your day feels really good. And spending another 4 hours or 8 hours or whatever a week doing some kind of, you know, grinding political organizing that feels change is very slow and you win things and they take them away right away and you just this sort of constant that's hard. It's hard to convince people to do that. And so figuring out and I think there's a balance here. You need to figure out how to make it feel good. You need to figure out how to make it feel good honestly. um and not just and so that's a challenge.
Mhm.
You need to make it feel like I am actually being involved in making real change and moving us closer to stateless, classless, moneyless society. Like how does that how have I contributed to that?
Yeah.
um and doing that without sort of lying to yourself about everything being a win.
Hmm.
It's hard.
Yeah. I'm thinking about like, the total transformation of values and discipline and um I don't know, just like personal experience of struggle that has to go from like I am a person that's working, 8, 10, 12 hours at my shit job. And I'm going to spend the last 2 hours of my day in a political line struggle over something really shitty that happened in the world versus I'm gonna go watch The Pit for an hour.
Yeah.
It's a big change. And I think it's one in, not to, essentialize or kind of stereotype Americans, but it's one that in America's culture of, convenience and plenty, where it's a choice that we're not accustomed to making on a daily basis. What, did you get a sense of how people get bought in to that kind of life in the party? Did you get a sense of like what honestly feels meaningful and rewarding about party work in PTB?
Yeah, I think one of the things I actually think the smaller cell structure, it does feel a little bit like a family, and you feel like you're this very important part of a fairly small structure. So having that very close knit touch point, as opposed to being one of 300 people with a voting card at a meeting, or just a person who gets called to phone bank or knock doors sometimes. You're really part of this structure. So I think that kind of, I was skeptical about the idea of like, oh, let's have like a million layers of structure. Like that just sounds like so much work doing the admin side of organizing. You don't actually get to do the class facing side of organizing. You're doing this like inward structure, but it does seem to create, I think, more serious buy-in, because we are social creatures and we feel like a part of this unit, and it really feels like it matters. It also, the unit becomes, I think, you get your appendix out and like somebody brings you dinner, like those kinds of basic kind of care things do help.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think chapter leaders just ask me all the time, how do you avoid burnout? How do you avoid burnout? How do you avoid burnout? I'm like, first of all, I don't. Like, yeah, I am but a normal mortal, and sometimes I lay on the floor and cry. But the thing that helps me avoid burnout is remembering that, like, my big struggle is like, oh, somebody was mean to me on Twitter, and like they mischaracterized something I said and turned it into this proxy battle for some other third thing. And like, the left has, even just in the United States, right, faced down the National Guard, the Pinkertons. They've been murdered by the FBI. They've been like, times have been worse than
Hmm.
somebody calling you fat on Twitter. Like it's
Hmm.
it's actually whatever. So I try to ground myself in that. I am actually, now that's a question that I want to ask them, like, how do you ground yourself in the left history? Like, I don't really know a lot about the left history of the Netherlands, other than like World War II resistance movements.
Mm.
Um, Beyond that, I don't know. I don't know when. Did I just say the Netherlands? I
You
meant
did you
Belgium.
did say the Netherlands, but
Yeah,
I'll,
whatever.
I'll let it slide.
Don't
But
tell them. Um, I don't know anything about the workers' movements in the Netherlands either.
mm,
Um, or Luxembourg. None of the Low Countries. I know nothing.
mm,
But yeah, outside of resistance movements in World War II, I don't really know when unions were formed or when. I mean, I assume it was probably roughly on the same timeline as everywhere, but I don't have a lot of
yeah.
specifics of uh you know that area of the world's labor history. I think I know more about like the French Revolution and things like that.
Hmm. Sure. In terms of like grounding, these our organizing relationships and organizing life in like the impacts we're having, were these cells like, um, obviously these are militants and not just, supporters. Um, but are they responsible for like doing party work in other spheres of their life as well? Obviously like the social reproduction of, caring for each other and supporting each other, and supporting people in your life, but also like the more of the production side, like where your economic life is, in the
Mm-hmm.
workplace, in um, other areas of exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Were those relationships kind of key to forming these cells as well?
Yeah, so cells can be formed in a few different ways. They can be geographical, so it's just people in your, and when I say neighborhood, I mean like they're within a couple blocks of each other, right? Like
Hmm.
you likely to be. But they also can be a workplace cell, and commonly are. That's a common way for them to be. I think there are some alternative, like if you want to make a cell, you can propose something.
Hmm.
As I kind of understand it. So, um, I don't know. I could see like, I don't know exactly how they do it, but I
Hmm.
could see if we were to try something like all of us who have kids who go to the same school could be things where you have this like common thing,
Hmm.
something that's holding you together. The cells are definitely not just six people shoved through the randomizer.
Hmm.
It is 6 to 8 people who share an immediate neighborhood, so they're in, which usually indicates they're going to be in a similar economic bracket, similar kind of, they probably have the same city councilor and obviously the same mayor and obviously the same
Sure.
workplace, obviously. School, right? There are um, university level cells. But yeah, sharing something, um, some sort of common, right?
Hmm.
I assume there are ones that are related to like a landlord. I don't know
Hmm.
um, a ton about it, but yeah. So
Yeah.
who do you hate? Your boss, your landlord, or
Right.
your mayor?
Yeah.
Well, one of those three people is who your cell is
Got
sharing.
it. But then tying this back to like the question of like, fatigue and DSA and, making sure that we still got the juice for the struggle. Like, do you think that, um, you know, obviously like, the moments of upheaval where the left was really fighting back are not just a thing of the past, but they're a thing of the present. People are organizing street watches. We've got people organizing huge demonstrations in solidarity with hunger strikers at ICE facilities. We've got people organizing huge demonstrations around like cuts to Medicaid, cuts to trans healthcare. There's a huge amount of struggle that's going on right now. And is there a way that we can maybe have DSA um, really feel like a home base for that kind of social political activity in a way that um, this party structure in Belgium is a similar kind of backbone?
I hope so. I mean, I think I want people to feel like DSA is the place. We throw around the word comrade, but it's like it actually means something, right? It means something pretty serious. Um, it means that you're in struggle together in a committed way. Um, it's both an expectation and an honorific to call somebody comrade. And so how do we build that same amount of buy-in? It is different to do it as a cross tendency mass party, because there will be internal tensions always. That the trick is, God, and I have not cracked the code, but like, how do you make those tensions political? Like, just
Mhm.
political. Why everybody gets so mean? Um, and I don't know how to make the meanness stop, because the meanness, it's easier to fight mean, right? It's easier to call somebody dumb. It's easier to call somebody lazy. It's easier to call somebody uncommitted. It's easier to call somebody unserious than it
Mhm.
is to actually analyze and figure out why their politics are different from yours, and how you can either
Mhm.
synthesize them or just come to a conclusion. It's I think that's easier in a line org.
Mhm.
I think there are things that are harder in a line org. It's inherently probably going to be a lot smaller. So when you're
Mhm.
actually trying to do mass movement things, um, it's more difficult. Um, Less appealing to lots of people. There benefits and drawbacks to both, obviously. The ideal thing would be for everybody to just agree with me on everything, and then we could all be in one big mass line org.
Mhm. Great. Well, we'll start working on that
Exactly. Problem
proposal
solved.
for 27 convention. Um, but yeah, I think, in a similar vein, of a question, DSA has spent a lot of our time in our modern iteration, the last 10 years, trying to articulate what it means to be a party.
Mm-hmm.
And there's virtual consensus in DSA. Very few people, very few organized currents within DSA would um, disagree that we should be trying to build or become a workers' party. But this consensus verbiage doesn't necessarily bring us closer to aligning in practice. And what was your impression of PTB as a party? You mentioned that that was
Yeah.
something you definitely felt.
Yeah. So partly like the US, the system is such that it's very hard to have a party in the same way that you can in a parliamentary system, or just it outside of weird American laws. Right? Like everybody wants to break from the Democrats immediately. Fine, whatever. I don't really care either way, but I think it's very cart before the horse, and it also ignores certain aspects of U.S. law, like if we have a Democratic Socialist of America ballot line, anybody can run on it, right? We don't control it. There the parties control their line. But what's more interesting to me is the way, like all those sort of details of the US system are not really relevant to the idea of building a party as this coherent, cohesive unit. And like that to me is the much more interesting question. How do we, we talk about like electoral discipline, and then we go sort of look out in the general public for people to run for office. Um, they don't have a problem with electoral discipline because their party members are who they run for office. Like it's not, those people are already bought in. They've already gone through the program. Like it's not even a question of discipline. It's kind of a weird framing of the question. Like discipline is something, right? We say it in Red Star a lot. Discipline is something you have, not something you do. And so how do you get people to like feel disciplined to this party?
Mm-hmm.
Um we we're very far from that. I think not in all cases. I think increasingly we have electeds who are very committed to DSA. It is not just their political home, but their kind of ride or dies
Mm-hmm.
for DSA, which I think does make a difference. The fact that that is still something that we're like ooh about
Mm-hmm.
means we've got a ways to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's just such a different context, right? Like, and when we say becoming a party, it's like we're always talking about structures and about rules and about bylaws and about all these things that become a party, and oh we're gonna write a better program and then we'll be closer to a party. And it's like, yeah, not if everybody is threatening to split every 10 minutes over
Mm-hmm.
something somebody else said. Not
Mm-hmm.
if we're not able to like bring a collective political discussion without it turning into, oh, you posted on Twitter. Like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
God. Like the becoming a party, I think we underestimate how much is vibes based, for lack of a better word. How much
Mm-hmm.
is just about us being committed to each other and the project and the movement? It's not
Mm-hmm.
vibes. That's not the right. It's I don't know. I feel like we think we're gonna solve it with the right bylaws or the right program or the right words.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're not solving for is this inability to have generative, productive political conflict, to
Mm-hmm.
bring that to each other in a way that is, again, both an expectation and, an honorific. It's an honor to debate you as my comrade. It's an honor to get
Mm-hmm.
to hear your opinions and to work through this together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Something that we've
you can say like
said.
I'm trying to demonstrate it and trying to build it that way.
Mhm.
It's can work. It also can, sort of be shattered. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
it's it's hard. How do you build that out of something that has so much of that in its modern DNA?
Right. One thing that we've said a lot in Red Star over our history is that the party cannot be declared; it can only be built. And I think that
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
something to like, really really turn over in our minds. That like, you know, simply calling ourselves something else does not fundamentally change how we act, how we struggle, how we approach the political problem in front of us. So that's something to bear in mind as we kind of keep trying to move towards, a situation where DSA is um, a organization that has a lot of a lot of tools at its disposal for waging class struggle. I think that that's something for us to remember. Do you have any thoughts about, obviously we just talked about how structure isn't really the thing, but like how DSA could develop in ways that make us more party-like in a PTB sense.
Yeah. So yeah, again, right. Structure is also extremely important, and I don't want anybody to take away that I think that it's not. Um, I some of it is cultural, obviously. developing this culture of constructive criticism, of generative political conflict, of we disagree on something politically and we bring it to the meeting and debate it right there, and we don't call our friends on the phone and line them up to make sure they're all ready to vote against the thing just because we don't like I'm not saying DSA can never whip votes or whatever. I'm just saying, like, we struggle to just center the political conflict as politics. um how can we build structure for that? Some of it has to be demonstrating, some of it also has to just, like, you have to have meetings in order to have political conflict in meetings. The meetings have to be structured in such a way that there's space and room for debate. um I think we also need to think more about democracy. We know democracy is not just voting. Okay, so what does, like, a people's democracy, what does a whole process democracy look like in the context of an organization? How do we do better about having roundtables where we're just discussing and, like, we can actually tug on some political questions? How do we, read together? Like, these very basic questions of how do we think about the strategies of how we're going to approach the shop floor collectively.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm sure at least one person watching this going, like, why doesn't she have any answers? To me, the most important thing is always to figure out the right question first, before you before you try to find the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're still in the process of figuring out exactly what the right questions are. But yeah, I think more spaces for good political debate. I think, yeah, more connection of when we have that good political debate with the work we're actually doing. I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we pass things or we say things and then it's like it doesn't actually reflect, we just sort of made a statement, right? And I don't want to be statementizers. I don't want to be um it can be good to write a statement collectively. It means you're clarifying your politics collectively. Then what? So yeah, the different pieces, connecting them. I do think smaller units is an interesting, I would love to see a chapter like experiment with some sort of, what does a base group look like? What does a core group look like? I think that would be such a cool, fun experiment. Like, what does it look like? We're going to just encourage people to form groups of 6 to 12 or whatever. And that's their little crew. And they are, yeah. What does a cell like that look like?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to see more of that. More experimentation with that kind of stuff. I think we have 200 and almost 50 chapters now. Like, we have some spaces to experiment. They are the laboratories of democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Let's crank up the flasks, crank
Yeah,
up the Erlenmeyer flasks, and see what can bubble out of it.
sure. I think one thing that is like kind of a contradiction the way that we think about politics in DSA and in the US more generally is that like our structure in DSA is really built around like government administrative units, right? We have county level, we have city level, we have um, things kind of apportioned by zip code. And that leads to like some very big organizations that have I would say maybe not the deepest roots in the communities that they're supposed to be kind of responsible to. And then I think there's this like bigger question of like responsibility, like what and accountability. We are not just like a society of any amorphous form. We are a socialist organization with socialist goals. Um, and we have historical tasks that um, I think have not just a moral, but like an economic and social uh, debt connection with the struggles of oppressed people around the world. And that's not an abstract thing. That's a real problem that we gotta reckon with and resolve. So how can we make not just you know these small groups that are kind of more able to synthesize political conditions in whatever they're doing, but also like really root our work in the historical tasks that are in front of us. Those are important things to keep on our mind. Yeah, any other thoughts about your experience with PTB, your trip on this conference, the shared struggles that the left is facing at this moment, and how we can kind of keep them in our mind, at front of mind as we approach our political work in this at this conjuncture.
Well, we definitely all need each other. I think I in the past have written off, the European left. Thank God. Right. Like who cares, right? I care about the global south. Um,
Hmm.
I think the European left is very valuable to us. They're organizing in closer conditions to ours than anybody. I mean, nobody's got conditions like the US, but it's closer. Um, they have potential to do things like close U.S. Army bases. Like they have some potential. The or European governments have the most potential to, like, if all the EU state governments like refused to deal with the US's embargo on Cuba, it would change, right? Like they vote in the UN, but they don't actually do anything. Um, what does it look like? What does it look like? What if they slap tariffs on us? Like, what if they actually have some power to shove at us a little bit? We're still the biggest. We're still the meanest. We're still the whatever. But um there is some space for them to help kind of kick one of the legs of the stool out,
Hmm.
while then making space for our comrades in the global south to actually you know win, because
Hmm.
I think that I'm still ultimately, I think that's where the win comes from.
Hmm.
How can we make those conditions uh, easier for them to do that is sort of largely our goal. But yeah, I mean, they're in conditions like we are in Europe similarly often, increasingly militaristic, increasingly neoliberal. How do they fight back against it? Some of it looks different, right? Parliamentary systems look different than this sort of two-party system
Hmm.
that we have. But the act of building a party, the act of building this collective unit, the political instrument, there's plenty we can learn from.
Hmm.
One thing that does stand out to me about PTB in particular, I mentioned earlier that I'm going back from Manifiesta in September. They're very good at incorporating fun and joy and
Hmm.
jokes and humor and good feeling. And I think that helps, especially being sort of rather sternly Marxist Leninist. Like it's important that to add that element of the joy of connectivity, and like the world we're trying to build for is not this um gray breadline socialism. It's this like vibrant world where we have room to express ourselves and live to our fullest human potential and all that. So
Hmm.
I think they're good at that. I think DSA should have a festival is what I'm trying to say.
Interesting. I will definitely have that thought in my mind for the rest of the day. Comrade Co-Chair, thank you so much. Thank you for listening. And to find more analysis from Red Star, visit our website, find us on social media, and feel free to reach out to us if you are a DSA member or communist activist to see if we are in your area. Take care and have a pleasant rest of your day.
Solidarity.